Rachel Reeves, who once had her parliamentary credit card suspended for racking up over £4,000 worth of unauthorised transactions, claimed her budget will grow the economy and attract investment into Britain. But the figures are showing the very opposite appears to be happening.
Nana Akua has had enough of Rachel Reeves, and she did not hold back when blasting her over the horrible economic changes. Rachel thought that she could continue to get away with making nonsense plans for Britain's economy, but Nana completely demolished her. Making blunders is nothing new for Rachel Reeves, but which one of them was so bad that it got Nana so angry? Well, let's just say that you'll be angry too once you hear the truth of what Rachel Reeves is doing behind the scenes.
Rachel plans to ease borrowing rules to unlock £50 billion of spending. So basically, she's rewriting the fiscal rules so that she can increase debt for investment in all these projects that they're planning. Now, this would, according to the Treasury's own analysis, increase the cost of debt and push up mortgage rates.
Rachel's secret plan is to mess with the fiscal rules and increase the borrowing limits. That means she can borrow more and more money for the public finances, and that'll end up in a major disaster. Unsurprisingly, this will increase the national debt and might mess up the economy even further. All of which goes against what Rachel Reeves initially promised. She's essentially doing whatever comes to her mind and hoping for the best.
Rachel has reportedly and repeatedly said that she will not play fast and loose with the public finances and will protect working people. But in doing this, it is suggested that it could put interest rates up by 1.25%, so from 5% to 6.25%, adding an extra £200 on average to a mortgage, which is not great considering rates are falling and that there was talk of the banks getting into bidding wars.
In what world does protecting working people lead to putting us all in more debt? The interest rates are bound to go up, and in the end, we'll have to bear the cost of this disaster. This will only make the cost of living more expensive for all of us, and even Labour thinks it's a bad idea. Labour's struggling to stay in government, and we're already seeing some very important people resign. Are they ditching a sinking ship?
We've been backtracking ever since, but the green shoots of recovery on the horizon have been crushed by this gloomy government. Mrs. Thatcher was right.
And socialist governments traditionally do make a financial mess. They always run out of other people's money. It's quite a characteristic of them.
Rishi Sunak was given a similarly horrible situation, and he did manage to halve the inflation. That's something that Rachel Reeves is struggling to do and will probably make things worse. We're already seeing the recovery process being crushed as Rachel is spending and borrowing a lot more of the public finances than the generated revenue. And that led to the resignation of a major member of the Labour Party. Will we see more resignations soon?
And also Sue Gray, the sidestepping of Sue Gray. I mean, she was pretty much Keir Starmer's wingwoman. Her ex-role as Chief of Staff was meant to get the party ready for government to take the flak and put him in a good light, but there's been a lot of take. Perhaps it's a distraction tactic, who knows? She's now the specialist envoy for nations and regions, which sounds to me like a made-up role. So, get ready, folks. We're in for a white knuckle ride. Time to tighten our belts. We've got 5 years of this.
Sue Gray resigned from a major position that earned her a hefty salary just to become an envoy. Why would Starmer's right hand take such a huge step down? It might be because she's struggling to do damage control for this government, or it might just be a drama created to distract us all from the major financial blunder Rachel Reeves has created with this budget.
OK, Jonathan, Miss Sue Gray, she's gone. She's moved on.
Yeah, it's not great.
No.
I have been surprised and disappointed, I suppose, by how early the government has seemed to be shaking. I didn't expect or anticipate it would look like this.
Everyone was expecting this to happen, just not this soon. The government is in shambles within a few months of power, and it's showing. There's internal chaos, and Starmer has already fired many members. However, someone like Sue Gray resigning is a big deal. She left on her own and took a more passive role. The reason behind this might be that she doesn't have faith in Starmer's leadership anymore.
Clearly, this is a sign that Labour has maybe taken its eye off the wheel and needs to make itself serious again, re-professionalise, and sort of get some more hands on deck to make it look like a unified operation, because it's not good for any government, particularly a government so early on, to be seeming as though it's divided or in any kind of chaos.
Labour has completely fallen off. They've forgotten what their priorities were, not that there were many to begin with, and they're struggling to stay united. Among all the other problems, like the constant backlash they're facing, this might be another major reason why this government might fall much sooner than we expect. What started this recent domino effect is Rachel Reeves' budget announcement that has been a complete disaster and proved Labour to be a bunch of hypocrites. They're doing the exact same thing that they bashed Liz Truss for.
The party have literally gone to town on Liz ever since.
Control. Liz Truss crashed the economy. They made it worse here than in other countries.
Liz Truss has even crashed the pork market. Now that is a disgrace.
2 years ago today, in their clamour to cut taxes for the richest, they crushed the economy, sent mortgages spiralling and put pensions in peril.
Really? But are Labour about to do the same thing, but in slow motion?
They've been calling Liz Truss out for a while now, long after her time was finished. Now, Rachel Reeves is paranoid about doing the same. It's one of her biggest fears, and by the looks of it, it's about to become a reality very soon. We're talking about a potential economic crash that might be the final straw for Starmer and his gang. In fact, people are already outraged and calling for new elections. But what's so bad about this supposed budget for growth that Rachel has cooked up?
Rachel Reeves, who once had her parliamentary credit card suspended for racking up over £4,000 worth of unauthorised transactions, claimed her budget will grow the economy and attract investment into Britain. But the figures are showing the very opposite appears to be happening. The surge in the number of business owners closing down is over concern that a raid on capital gains tax to raise £40 billion is planned, and more than 1,600 companies have shut shop in anticipation.
Our lovely Chancellor cannot even manage her own finances properly and is lecturing us about how to run the whole nation's economy. Her budget for growth is anything but that. In fact, it's so horribly designed that it crushes every single possibility for growth with tons of taxes and restrictions that are paralysing businesses. The closer you look at the budget, the worse it gets.
So, first of all, police, defence, NHS. Well, I don't think the defence is underfunded. I think it's just been badly spent. And the NHS, again, another big black hole that's spending money incredibly badly, Stephen, you know that. And, yeah, the police could do with more money. I would agree with that. But growth, productivity, you're announcing things or things are leaking through and businesses are running for the hills. I mean, this is what we are seeing. Even if maybe they do want growth, which maybe they do, but taxing national insurance, increasing employers' national insurance by 2% is not going to encourage growth, is it?
Rachel Reeves is pouring money into useless schemes and programs that are inefficient. The major problem with the public sector has always been that they waste a lot more money and achieve very little productive benefits. What does Rachel think will happen if she just hands them even more money? She's essentially gambling with this nation's finances.
Just repeat my question, Anna. Where, if not from here, where will the money come from?
All right, well, I'll tell you, the first thing I would do is cut the civil service. I would reduce that ridiculously over-bloated bureaucratic organisation to much lower levels, and I'm sure I could get billions that way. That would be the first starting point. I would scrap this nonsense of carbon capture, which is just absurd. Storing vast amounts of high-pressure carbon under the seabed next to oil and gas wells. Madness. We'll probably blow up the planet ourselves. I mean, look, there are some very stupid schemes that I think they're setting up.
It really is as simple as it sounds. Nana completely schools Rachel Reeves at her own job. It should be a non-brainer that the inefficient civil service should be fixed and all the ridiculous schemes should be cut off. Or at the very least, the government shouldn't be spending billions of pounds on it. How's that for a change? Sounds like a better plan than anything Rachel Reeves or Starmer have come up with in months.
I think we can expect on Wednesday to have a whole range of tax hikes. They could include making the price of a pint or a bottle of wine more expensive, price of filling up your tank of petrol more expensive, the price of hiring a member of staff or promoting a member of staff more expensive, the price of selling property or selling shares or investments more expensive, the price of putting money into your pension or taking money out of your pension more expensive, and at the same time Rachel Reeves will have the conceit and the shamelessness to stand up and say at the dispatch box, we're not raising taxes on working people, and I think that is truly appalling.
Everything from a good drink to energy bills are going up. There's nobody left who wouldn't suffer from this. The pensioners and the farmers have already been clobbered by the consequences of this budget, and the rest of us will face it soon as well. The cherry on top is that Rachel Reeves will still have the audacity to say that she's done nothing wrong. They'll probably double down on it.
So what should she be doing? What should, in your view, Rachel Reeves be doing?
Well, listen, the biggest problem we have in this country is that the public sector is incredibly unproductive. So over the last 25 years, we've seen a fairly healthy increase in private sector productivity. So the private sector is growing more productive and is growing more efficient. Public sector productivity hasn't increased for 25 years. We've added, I think it's 318 public sector workers a day over the last year, about 120,000 public sector workers in total, despite the fact productivity has gone down by 7.5%.
Remember the billions of pounds Rachel Reeves spent in giving pay rises to the public sector unions? Well, turns out that wasn't a good idea. Who would have thought? We've gotten no productivity gains in return, and the private sector is being punished for it by even more taxes and financial burdens. The public sector has gotten incredibly bloated, and it's just eating up resources. No wonder so many people are calling for another general election to get rid of this government.
Do you want another general election now? Because over 900,000 people have signed a petition and it's still climbing, calling for just that. Thousands of people signing every single minute. Prime Minister could be faced with a humiliating debate in Parliament. So for the Great British Debate this year, I'm asking, do you want another general election now?
Almost 1 million people are done with this government, and that's just in 24 hours. The number is getting higher by the minute, and that just goes to show how bad it's gotten. We're not even a few months into the new government, and people are already fed up. Do you want another general election? And will this government fall soon?
This petition will result in a general election, even if it got, if it got to 9.7 million people voting in favour of another election. That's the same number of votes that Labour got, so that would be interesting. But I think there's people say to me, Ben, there's no chance of this government giving up its huge majority, no matter what happens between now.
As things are right now, it's unclear if this petition alone will be enough to force this government out. Think about it. They have an overwhelming majority. Why would they give that up? They're going to do everything they can to complete their term. However, there is a possibility that they'll be booted out, but things will have to get a lot worse for that to happen.
I think that there are pressures that can come to bear that could force this government back to the electorate. And the most obvious one is a collapse in the economy. And I think some of the measures taken by Rachel Reeves already are not playing out the way she expected them to play out. Sterling, I don't know if people are watching, but sterling is down 7% against the dollar in the last 3 months.
Rachel Reeves might just be the reason that will force this government out. A collapse in the economy would be devastating for all of us, but that is the direction where Rachel is headed. Everything she is doing has put our economy in a complete stun lock. Our currency is already taking a dip as countless businesses are shutting down and major ones are leaving Britain.
And there's a very, very real possibility that she's got her numbers wrong, that she will need to borrow more money than she says she's going to have to borrow, that growth will go through the floor, we will be in a recession. In fact, all the indicators are that we're heading into a recession. Unemployment will rise. And even if they put up interest rates, they won't be able to get people to buy British government bonds. Then you have the United Kingdom going off to the IMF, cap in hand, saying, please, can we have a bailout? And that would be a disaster for any government.
The spending alone is horrendous as it is, but now that Rachel Reeves is borrowing money as well, it's a deadly duo. Mismanagement is Labour's speciality, and chances are that Rachel has got all her numbers wrong. She'll end up borrowing a lot more than she expects, and guess what will happen after that? Pair that with all the people that are already mad at this government, and you've got the recipe for downfall.
They've upset the farmers, they've upset the pensioners, they've upset the middle class in general when it comes to schooling for the VAT raid. They've upset businesses, small business owners and big business. There's a lot of people that they have upset. Very few people I can think are happy. Civil servants.
Every single member.
And maybe train drivers.
Some nurses are happy, some doctors are happy, some train drivers are happy. You know, there's going to be portions of the public. Look, it's going to take a long time. They've only been in power a couple of months.
But look at the devastation in a couple of months.
The upper class is leaving Britain, the lower class is already suffering, and now Rachel Reeves has made an enemy out of the middle class. Pensioners are angry over their fuel allowances, the farmers are angry over the inheritance taxes, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Everyone other than the public sector workers that are ripping this government off with countless pay rises are upset at this government, and rightfully so.
There's 30-odd billion of unfunded tax of spending pledges made by Rachel Reeves in the last budget. 45 billion is going to be raised through tax increases, but there's another 32 billion of additional government borrowing she's going to have to do as a result of her last budget. And And that the OBR seems to have accepted that. But if in 6 months the government isn't getting the receipts from the private sector that it thinks it's going to get, and the borrowing requirement is higher than 32 billion, and I'm talking about 6 months, I think it's going to be quite quick.
According to Rachel Reeves, there's a £22 billion black hole in the public finances. What does she do about it? Instead of cutting costs, she has already pledged 30 more billion in spending. Where's all that money going to come from? Does she expect to tax us all that amount, or is she going to borrow it all? Either way, we'll have to face the consequences because the Chancellor lives a rather cushy life. The worst part is, Rachel Reeves knows that her policies are horrible and goes ahead with them anyway.
A quote from Rachel Reeves where she says exactly how devastating a rise in national insurance would be for employers, and yet she's gone ahead with it. So this is the problem that we're having. And then even seeing how badly this is affecting the farmers, the raid on inheritance tax, I mean, that's utter madness.
The insurance tax is something Rachel Reeves has herself called out the Tories for multiple times. Yet, now she's implementing the very same scheme. Does that not make her a hypocrite? It might be that being in the opposition and just hating everything is much easier than actually solving the problems. And that's something the Labour Party has no idea on how to do. While this hike ruins businesses, Rachel Reeves has set her sights on the farmers as well, who are barely making any money and now have to pay a huge inheritance.
The thing about the small farms is that they are owned by patrician families who do it for a love of the land and because they have the skill set required to do it. It's not an easy job to do, not many people wish to do it, and the skill sets required are very specific. If these patrician families can't hand these very low income generating properties from parent to child and so on, you break that patrician family ownership and they will not come back.
Most of these farms have been passed down through generations and it's incredibly difficult to keep them running. Imagine the working conditions, the low income and all the hassle these farmers already have to go to. Now, Rachel Reeves is demanding an insane amount of inheritance tax. If these farmers are unable to pass down these farms to their children, they'll just end up selling the land and leaving. Who will produce all the food then? We're already more dependent on imports than we should be. The farmers aren't accepting this though. There's already strikes going on and they have no intention to back down.
Is there any... You spoke to Rachel Reeves. Did you get the impression that she may well consider U-turning on this particular policy?
When I interviewed Rachel Reeves, which was on Friday, she was very firm that they think that it's a fair deal for farmers. They say that if it's a couple owning a farm, they can pass across £3 million. Then it's 20% inheritance tax, half the rate that you or I would pay. They've got 10 years to pay it, and so on and so forth. The Treasury thinks that only about 500 farms a year would be impacted, but the National Farmers Union think that the Treasury have got their figures very wrong.
Rachel Reeves has her numbers wrong yet again. She thinks that not a lot of farms will be affected by this ridiculous policy, but the independent agencies are already disagreeing with her. Let's not forget that even if one farmer has to pay an egregious amount of tax, then it's one too many. The farmers have just as harsh words to say about Rachel Reeves as Nana does.
They've got the figures 100% wrong, and I do remember when my parents inherited the farm in the late 60s, they were poor for 15 years because of the high tax rate, and my parents did without holidays. We had second-hand clothes. But this is nothing about taxation. This is class warfare against the farmers and the Labour Party hatred of the countryside and the farmers. We produce food, we produce good food, we produce cheap food.
It's an absolute disgrace that the Labour is using their power as an excuse to start a class war. Starmer and his gang continue to receive expensive gifts while the middle class is suffering. Could it be that they just hate the farmers and the countryside?
And I think the Labour Party have got this wrong. And I think they need to reconsider it, but they won't because they have this dogma, they're right. And they're not going to raise the money they think they're going to raise. And when they do raise the money, they waste it. So this is all about, nothing about taxation. This is to do with class hatred. And we've heard their policy advisor saying, we don't need farmers in the UK. We know what their policy is.
All the data is pointing towards an ideological grudge that Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer seem to have with the farmers. They're pushing this agenda of being eco-friendly and how farms are not that sustainable anyway. Perhaps the taxes are an excuse to force these farmers into selling their lands. The lands will be bought up by these huge liberal companies and used for useless green schemes. The expected tax raising from this tax is way too low for it to be otherwise.
Sir Keir Starmer was accused of running out of the back door like a rat to avoid the angry farmers protesting outside the Welsh Labour conference. That was actually by Gareth Wyn-Jones. I spoke to him yesterday on my show over the controversial changes to inheritance tax on farms. Now, farmers continue to voice their anger and many have threatened to go on strike, cutting off Britain's domestic food supply. More strikes are expected throughout the next week. Do the government have a major issue on their hands?
Labour knows that what they're doing is cruel and unfair. Why else would Starmer run away from angry farmers? Rachel Reeves is no different. She avoids giving any answers to difficult questions. And that's exactly why Nana is so angry. There's no excuse for this, and Nana is absolutely right to wipe the floor with Rachel Reeves and her nonsensical schemes. The way things are looking, another general election might be closer than you think. If you're just as fed up with this government as everyone else is, then you can help in holding them accountable by liking this video and subscribing to the channel.